All right, this is Steve with Real Progressives. Excited to have everyone join us today on this May Day. By all means, thank you all for being labor. Thank you all for being part of the 99%. Thank you all indeed for supporting Real Progressives. Folks, this is absolutely the time of year when people start remembering that labor was once a force in this country. Unfortunately, over the course of time, not only has the job market changed, but the war between labor and capital and management and employee and so forth has really become so lopsided that you have to wonder whatever happened to labor. So let's go ahead first off and celebrate some of the victories that labor has done and show the history of this May Day experience, folks. I give you one of the most incredible montages my team has ever put together. Here we go. folks, my team did a great job putting that together. I want to thank, Andy Kennedy, um, Christina, Jimmy, and Mindy, and others who worked heavily on this all day. Virginia, you all did a great job, and anybody that I missed, just want to say thank you guys for putting so much heart and soul into this. Folks, that video was put together in one day. That was done today in preparation for this. So what I want to do, Ellis was kind enough to reach out to me earlier and said, "Hey, mate, you'd like to do a live stream tonight?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, we got May Day." He's like, "What a great day to talk about a job guarantee." And we started talking about what this could look like. And he's like, "Hey, I tell you what, let's do it." So I said, "Well, let's do it." So without further ado, my friends, let me bring on Mr. Ellis Winningham. How are you, sir?
Hey, how you doing, Stephen?
I'm doing well. So, Ellis, you didn't get to see that montage, but after we're done with this, I hope you'll go back and watch it. It's amazing. The history of labor and understanding what labor has gone through in order to bring about, any kind of balance between the capital and the workers is just an amazing story. It is very depressing to see what's happened to labor in the last 30, 40 years. Obviously, the 8-hour day is a big part of this May Day celebration. But there's a lot of death, a lot of people being suicided, a lot of really, really tough situations that have gone on throughout the course of the labor movement. And you look back at the United States and the Cold War and the fear of solidarity across country borders and the fear of solidarity of union workers and workers in general, realizing that the 99% is made up of workers. It's labor, period. And the fear of seeing us come together is the same fear that you see in the political sphere of them watching the 99% come together in order to achieve great things. I mean, it sends chills up my spine.
Yeah, that's the thing is that the majority of society is labor, and when we speak of labor, we're not talking about just people who drive trucks, or people who work at Walmart, or people who work at Target, or people who work flipping burgers at Burger King. We're not talking about just people who repair roads, or do manual labor. We're also talking about people who do office work. Okay, we're talking about people who are produce buyers, right? People who work for a living, who have to work for someone else. All right, these are workers, and 99% of the American population is labor. Of course, you have people that are unemployed and people that can't work, but I think you understand the gist of what I'm getting at. The majority here of the 99% is labor. And a very, very small contingent of society is what people refer to as the 1%, the wealthy, the billionaire class, or whatever the hell you want to call them, who sit on their asses and steal your birthright.
So in a modern money economy, we've got a situation, it would appear, where the people are left decentralized. I mean, there are no more just one building and everybody can just file out the front door and block off access. There's so many of the things that were available back in the day when we were factory workers and so forth. They're not there for us the same way. Labor has changed dramatically. So what does, a labor movement look like if we're to celebrate May Day properly today? What would giving labor power look like in a modern economy like we have now?
It wouldn't look anything like the way you remember labor from, let's say, 100 years ago or 80 years ago, or during the time of FDR, or during the time of Jimmy Hoffa. Those days are gone. The particular type of monetary system. I shouldn't say that, but the way in which the monetary system worked at that time is vastly different than it is today. And this has profound implications on labor and how a labor movement would be structured in a modern society. Yeah, in 2019, it would look anything like the heady days of Jimmy Hoffa and the RTA strike. You know, today we're talking about a labor movement that's centered around macroeconomics, that understands its role in the nation. It's the most important aspect of society because it produces what we consume. We must understand that. Capital may contribute certain things like capital equipment or a little bit of money here and there, you know, but it's labor that produces what we consume. In other words, society produces what society consumes. The capitalist simply sucks away the birthright. I call it the birthright. I'll explain that later in the program. But capital basically leeches off the production of society. In other words, it's a very, very small contingent of individuals within society that basically suck the blood out of society itself. And they make society so weak that it's apathetic and refuses to act to protect itself. Okay? A new labor movement, a modern labor movement, will recognize this and refuse to lay down for a handful of snobs just because the numbers in their bank accounts are much larger than everyone else's. You see? So we have a plan, shall we say. We have a way to deal with this problem and return what is rightfully, return the birthright to society, which is rightfully theirs. And we're going to do that to start with by instituting federal job guarantee. Okay? And we're going to redefine the concept of work. And we're going to understand what money really is, where it comes from, and its function in society. And a modern labor movement will understand these things clearly. And once it does, it will no longer lie down. It will no longer think that its fight is against capital. I guess it's like I told you today. Labor must realize, it must come to the realization that in a modern monetary economy, labor's fight is with itself. That is where labor's struggle is. Labor's struggle is with itself. And until labor decides to stop struggling with itself, it's going to remain oppressed. And we have the information, we have the solution to allow labor to put the struggle where it really belongs.
What is labor struggling with itself ever? Talk to me a little bit about what that struggle actually is.
Okay, this is a lot to do with fundamentals that like prerequisites to understanding MMT. Okay, this is more of a sociological question, but basically, let me put it this way so your audience can understand clearly. When activists expose the general public to MMT, usually it's on the taxation question. That's where everything begins, as you know. They talk about taxes not funding national government spending, and it begins from there. And that part of the education is, shall we say, a little bit far into the educational sequence itself. There's much to be known prior to that. There are prerequisites to understanding what's really going on. And one of the ways that I want to express it is to say, basically, labor's struggle with itself means that labor does not realize it is not a separate segment of society. The average MMT layperson who is interested in MMT does not realize certain realities regarding society, and they're very important to understanding the basic fundamentals of MMT and what it implies. Okay. I hope I'm making sense here.
No, you're making perfect sense.
Okay. Basically, what I'm telling you is that your average MMT, your layperson, does not realize that it is society itself that issues the currency. People talk about, well, the government, the private sector, the private sector. There is only one sector, and it's the nation itself in question. And a nation is society. Every valid citizen, it creates a society. Okay? It's society that's in charge of itself. And the struggle that labor has is it has not come to the awareness that it is society. It thinks it's separate from society, like a separate clique in society or a separate cohort in society. Like over here you have the capitalists, and over here you have labor, and over here you have consumers, and over here you have the government sector, and over here you have the private sector. You see what I'm saying? And people do not realize that none of that exists. None of it exists. All that exists is a nation.
See, I think if you look at what we're going through with neoliberalism, you realize that neoliberalism desires us to be divided and balkanized into little tiny groups, so small, so putrid, so wimpy that we can't affect change. So keep going. Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree.
Yeah, one of the major aspects of one of the things that neoliberalism does seek to do is to divide and keep people confused as to who they really are. It blurs their true identity, and it leaves them thinking individualism rules the day. There is a such thing as a private sector, and it knows best. And we need privatization because only the private sector is efficient. Government is inefficient. And I think the last time I was on the program, we were talking about they behave as though there's such thing as private sector man and public sector man in human evolution, and public sector man has a lower IQ by nature, is a knuckle dragger. Well, the private sector man is like Einstein, is a genius. It's all bullshit. Okay, there is no such thing as a private sector. The term private sector is used for accounting purposes, and it's also used to divide for analysis, divide roles up so that we can analyze flows and things going on by sector. In reality, it doesn't exist. There is only, like I said, a nation. And a nation is composed of what? Every single valid citizen of that nation. That is society as a whole. Every single citizen together forms a thing called society. So if we're talking about the United States, we're talking about US citizens form US society. If we're talking about the UK, you have UK society. The government is not a separate foreign alien entity from society. The government is society. The private sector is society. It's US society, it's UK society. We're all one. It's just a nation. There is no separation. There's no demarcation line. So when we talk about labor not, not being aware of itself and its role, labor is not aware of this simple concept. And it thinks that it must struggle against the capitalist and it must struggle against this. It's really struggling against itself. Excuse me. And the reason why it is because what it has to do, and the only struggle that it has to deal with, is to realize and become self-aware that it is US society, it is UK society. We're all workers. And all the capitalist really is a small, tiny segment of society that has decided to break away from society and self-identify. That's all. It doesn't make it real. It's just a small group of rebellious human beings that have large numbers in their bank accounts that seem to think they are greater than the nation itself. And they want charge, they want power. And labor needs to realize that all it is a bunch of little tiny handful of upstarts. And society needs to assert its will by seizing control of the thing that it created and instituted, the national government. The national government is society. Society as a whole can do whatever the hell it pleases. There is no right and wrong. Society can choose its own destiny, and it uses the power, the currency issuing authority and the regulatory authority of the government that it instituted to achieve its own ends, to achieve its will. And once society realizes this, once the masses realize it, labor will realize that its struggle is with itself.
So what you're telling me is that when people understand how the U.S. government, which owns the unit of account, which is the U.S. dollar, that labor then in turn will stop eating itself and will start making demands because it will have the power and the strength and knowledge, not to mention just sheer numbers, to take over what it owns to begin with. It just doesn't know it owns it. Just to beaten down.
I'm telling you that labor owns the unit of account. I'm telling you that disabled people own the unit of account. I'm telling you that the elderly on Social Security benefits own the unit of account. Okay, they are the government. Now, you can argue, well, we have an oligarchy. We have an oligarchy. It may be true, but you still vote. They haven't destroyed democracy yet completely. It's still there, even if it's in tiny little vestiges of its former self. Labor owns the unit of account. Labor controls the money source because it is society.
Hence the public
and it
money.
needs to, right. And society simply needs to assert its will over a tiny group of upstarts who think they are bigger than society and bigger than the nation itself. The government is nothing without society, and society, the nation itself, cannot exist without the government. If you can look at Bill Gates, for instance, a perfect example, he's a billionaire. Hey, that's great. The guy who owns Amazon, he's a billionaire. Hey, that's fucking great. But are they both US citizens? Yes. Am I? Yes. Are you, Stephen?
No.
Yes. Why are we different?
Because
we're different because we're different. Bill Gates is different than you and I because he has larger numbers in his bank account. But he still is one individual in US society as a whole. What gives him the right to be greater than the nation? Nothing. Why should society lie down for a bunch of upstarts who've decided to steal every citizen's birthright? And what's that birthright I'm talking about? I'm talking about the fact that society itself issues its own currency for its own well-being. That's right. You talk about the government doing, well, the government does it. The national government issues currency. Yes, it's true. But it's society that established the government, and the government's job is to do the will of society and to ensure that the well-being of society is met at all times. Okay? Society, therefore, issues its own currency and regulates its own nation, its own markets, regulates its own economy. It creates laws to govern itself. There is no private sector. There is no government sector. There is none of this crap. There is only us. One individual, one group of people. Excuse me.
Would it be a fair statement to say then that the very struggle that Marx called for, the very struggle that we have heard throughout time, if we but embrace and understand the power we have with our sovereign currency, that we have, in a sense, seized the means of production, and that by
Yes.
extension sees the means of production for society, and can then in turn create a society that's more to our liking. Is that really what you're saying? One that's representative of our wants and needs?
What I'm saying is the fundamental truth is that society is the government is society, society is the nation. No one individual, no small group of individuals broken away from society are greater than the whole. It's a fictional image that we've created in our minds, okay? And what I'm saying to you is, we're not talking about actually literally seizing the means of production, where the workers control the means of production by going out and there's no more private property and workers, and all. That's not necessarily the case. You don't have to do that. But in the sense that if society finally wakes up and realizes and becomes self-aware, very important that society becomes self-aware. If it became self-aware and understood that it alone issues the currency, it alone controls the real resources within the nation, because it alone is the nation itself. If it were to realize this one day and become self-aware, there is nothing stopping society from saying, go ahead and continue with private ownership of the production all you want, but we're going to seize control of our government back from the hands of fear, and we're going to use our currency issuing and regulatory authority to ensure the well-being of every single citizen. Every single citizen will derive good benefit from their economy, and they will all enjoy life to their fullest potential. And no one's ever going to oppress them again. In that sense, yeah, it's kind of like saying the workers have seized control of the means of production by becoming self-aware. Yeah. But in reality, the way that you would seize control of the means of production would literally be to do so and take it out of the hands of the capitalist. What I'm trying to tell you is, though I'm not a supporter of capitalism at all, what I am telling you is that a similar betterment of society and betterment of the nation can be had. Something similar can be had by simply realizing that it is society that issues its own currency and regulates itself and governs itself.
See,
okay.
These conspiracies we've talked about in the past are the ones that get in the way of our future. And more to the point, I look over there in France and I look at the yellow vests, and there's so much to be envious of in some respects, and that they are taking it seriously and they're fighting back. But then you look at it and they want to pull their money from the banks because they think that bank runs in a modern money economy are somehow or another a thing. And it's like they don't understand. And so this is where, you talk about flaccid and ineffectual demonstrations. People get angry when you talk about that because they're so wedded to these bad ideas, these myths that have held labor back, held society back, and continue to hold society back. And they are very much sacred territory for a lot of the left. And you see it in very real form in present day in the yellow vests. Some of their ideas are back in some non-gold standard, not even gold standard era. I mean, they're just they just don't have any place in society, but they feel like they're achieving something. It's really sad because you want them to be successful. You would like to see them win, but there is too much backslapping and too much self-congratulatory focus on just putting the fist in the air that they're not using the noodle. And what we're talking about here would just blow the lid off that whole thing. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that when you go up there and you knock on the door and show them the picture saying, I know how this works, that's when their blood gets cold. When they see you running and chasing fairies, they know that they got you. They know they don't have to panic anymore. And that's why, if I can summarize, that's one of my chief complaints against not only our movement, but labor as a whole. They are deeply wedded to myths and legends that keep us all still stuck in chains. And I think this is a great message tonight in terms of what you've laid out, because hopefully some people from the labor side and the left will actually listen and take the time to step away from, the pulpit of yesteryear's lore, and embrace this beautiful opportunity to really, really take, the dreams and aspirations of all humanity, and provide them self-actualization in a better life.
Mhm. Yeah. Like I said, the thing is that labor needs to become self-aware, but society itself needs to become self-aware. It needs to understand that it's never lost control. It's simply handed it over and gone to sleep. Okay? We've just allowed rich people on the premise that, well, they're so powerful, what can we do anyway? We've allowed rich people to install their own candidates in office who then write legislation to benefit rich people, which are nothing but a small handful of individuals inside of society. They're not separate from, they're not greater than society itself. They've just decided that they are greater than society, and they've created a bunch of propaganda to make some wild claim that they control everything. And there's nothing you can do. You have to fight them, and you have to play by their rules and on their terms to progress. And that's a lie. You don't have to march on this, and you don't have to strike that. What you really need to do is convince the rest of America, the majority of America, the majority of the United Kingdom, the majority of Australia to wake up and realize who they are. They're all workers. And you're laying down and letting these pricks shit all over you. You've allowed them to convince you that's what's best, to let them shit all over you, and then you have to clean it up. You get nothing out of the deal. The truth is, society produces everything that society consumes. There aren't separate entities here. Everyone is a consumer. Do you remember when you took that live stream that I made? This reminds me, make an excellent point. You remember when you took that live stream that I made about, I forget what the topic was, but I talked about consumer, what a consumer is, and how the rich guy, the CEO of a bank, leaves for lunch and he drives through Starbucks. At that moment, he goes from being the business leader to a consumer, just like you and I. You remember that? Okay, well, that's the thing. Nobody is just a consumer. Nobody is just labor. And nobody is just a capitalist. You see what I'm saying? Everybody is a consumer. Everybody, because everybody forms society. Everybody has to consume. There's no separate things that are divided up. Okay, there's no separate sectors and separate types of people and all that. It's just one nation that produces goods and services, which it then sells back to itself. It seems like this is an abstract concept and it's hard for people to grasp. But it's just one giant family that produces goods and services that it sells back to itself. That's it. End of story. There's nothing foreign. There's not little separate things going on. Like capital is not a foreign entity from U.S. society. Labor is not a separate entity from U.S. society. It's all together us. And because it's all us, okay, and the majority of us have decided that we're going to work for the capitalists and not be capitalists, because that has occurred, because we've been conditioned to believe that's the way things should work, we've decided that because the capitalist has the money and he's the boss man, that we must rely on the capitalist for our daily bread. And that's BS. What you're basically saying is society as a whole, the vast majority of society, depends on a small handful of individuals within society to feed all of society. It's bunk, because the majority of society is the one that's producing the food, that's producing the cars and the clothing that it then purchases.
Would it,
It's just like it's like a person with multiple personality disorder. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's the way we Americans and we people in the UK and in Australia view ourselves and our nations as multiple personality disorder. I'm Joe the worker. Over there, that's Jim the capitalist. Over here is Jim the Social Security recipient. Over there is Jane consumer. And there's no such thing. We're just one body. Okay. you,
Ellis,
nobody seems to grasp this. It's very simple.
Does this not 100% map the deification of the wealthy, the capitalist?
Yes.
The demonization, which is an equal form of deification of the rich. The idea that the taxes are what pay for all these things is the same exact thing as relying on them for all the work and thinking that they are going to bring everything. This is the same exact story. People don't realize that by thinking that the rich are paying for the taxes that they pay or somehow or another paying for society, it is one more step in their deification, making them gods, mortal gods, these demigods or whatever the heck they are. By their decree, we get to exist and, have our porridge, etc. And I think that, this is why, for me, I spent so much time personally, even though I know this is not the key insight to MMT, but this is why I spent so damn much time trying to break the stranglehold of the concept that taxes pay for spending. And here we are, we realize, well, those of us who have taken the time to do the research realize that the government funds, as you say, the taxpayers. It's not the other way around. And the government, as you've clearly stated, is we the people, even though it's been bastardized and we've put a mask over our face and we've not paid attention to whatever. The truth is that the government is us. It's just right now, currently, in the hands of a very bad few that are very greedy and that are taking things for themselves to our detriment. And it's up to us. Right. It is up to us to own that and accept that and take steps in unification to stop that. And you're right. Tying it back to what you said earlier, it's up to labor to get out of labor's own way and realize where the enemy is and how to fight and how to win. And it starts with being united and understanding that we're all workers, that we're all labor, and that society owns the means of producing the dollars so that we can provide a life more bountiful to everyone.
Yeah, you see, that's the thing. Society itself owns the means of currency issuance. It owns the money. But we have chosen to allow private ownership of production. But we have public ownership of the financial dealing, where we issue the currency. So it's public issuance of currency coming up against private ownership of the means of production. And society needs to realize that capital can't do dick without society's money. See how that works? And let me go back just a little bit when you were talking about taxes. This is what I'm talking about. People view like, well, there's the government sector and then there's the private sector. And when you view those things as reality, as the way things really are, and society doesn't exist, it's just individuals, and there's a real private sector, it's a real and true thing, like planet whatever the fuck with aliens living on it, and if you view the private sector to be a real thing like Hobbit, okay, and the government sector to be a real thing like Mordor, okay, if you really believe in this bullshit, then you're clearly going to see a demarcation line. A demarcation that the United States is made up of various different entities that are all in a struggle against one another. You see, in the private sector is the superior entity of all, right? If you believe this nonsense, then obviously you're going to see the US government as a foreign type of entity that cannot produce and it cannot profit. So the only way it can earn an income is by taxing. And it goes out and it steals the money of the private sector. You see, of course you're going to see it. Yes, but what if you see things correctly from the correct perspective, on the correct view, that society is society. Society is the nation is society. The national government is not greater than society. It is the embodiment of the will of society. When you realize that, you realize that society is actually issuing its own currency, not a separate entity called the government, but society itself issues its own currency. When you realize that, you must ask the question, if society issues its own currency, why would it need to tax itself for revenue? That's like saying, well, my name is Joe Bob, and I need to earn an income. So what I do for a living is I wake up every morning and I put $1 in my left pocket, and then I put my hand down in there, and I take that dollar and I put it in my right pocket, and that's $1 of income. Now I'm going to tax myself, so I put my right hand in my right pocket, pull that dollar out, and I put it in my left pocket, and now I'm broke because I paid my taxes. It's ridiculous.
That's called redistribution there, Ellis.
Yeah, that's redistribution from left to the right pocket. That's the whole thing that people need to get. That people struggle and agonize. How do you convince people to understand that federal taxes don't fund federal spending? It's real simple. When they understand basic prerequisites, what a nation is, so basic, these basic premises, and who issues the currency, you come to the final realization that if society is issuing its own money, okay, and controls the unit of account and is issuing liabilities denominated in that unit of account for the sole purpose, okay, of operating a modern monetary economy, then you come to the realization that it is a pointless act for society itself to tax itself because it's broke and it needs the money, even though it's issuing the money. It doesn't make any sense. And factually, that's what's going on. The power of the government that society instituted, the national government, it gave it the authority to issue currency in the name of the people, and it gave it authority to regulate the economy, which is another creation of society. It's all society. It's one person alone in their room playing. Okay, that's all it really is. If society is issuing its own currency, it's definitely not going to require an income. Now, on the micro level, a business or a household, individual household, is going to require income because an individual is not a currency issuer, but society as a whole is the currency issuer through the power of the national government. You see?
So let's shift, because this is, in my opinion, a great pivot point to talking about the federal job guarantee. And I want to preface this before we go any further.
Society giving itself a job.
Well, society has allowed the environment to go to hell in a handbasket. Society has allowed us to be in perpetual war. Society has allowed so many things, as these few have done so much damage to us all. And the job guarantee is like taking back a lot of that power and bringing it back to society once again, to self-manage, to provide for things that the capitalists don't necessarily find valuable, but we, the people, would find valuable in a federally funded, locally administered. When I say administered, folks, I'm just going to speak for myself here. when I think of that, I think of a democracy enhancing local government. All of a sudden, people that had never paid attention to who was running for their local municipal government seats or their state or even county, suddenly those people matter now because they are going to be instrumental in picking and choosing and laying out what the local instantation or instantiation of the federal job guarantee is. So you sure as hell better show up at your town halls. You sure as hell better show up at each of these local voting booths and put your 2 cents worth in there. Show up to the debates. Show up to and be a part of your community. And so
exactly, because if anything, you get to determine the right to basically say to define what work is, what valid work is. You get the opportunity to sit there and say, I think this should be a valid form of work and there should be a job formed around it. You get to decide what a real job is. You get to redefine work to your taste, what you think is necessary, what you think is beneficial to your community, and a job will be created for that sole purpose. Yes, that's an important point that you bring up there. So yes, you should. If there is a job guarantee and it were administered locally by government, you should show up at those town hall meetings because you and your voice get to determine what work is.
I see, to me, people say, what are you talking about? Just make work? And I say to myself,
oh my God.
If I show up to a town hall meeting and I'm in the process of explaining things that matter to me, I'm talking about my son who hasn't had a TSS in over a year. And I'm saying we can't afford to not fund that. And I'm looking around and I'm saying, but there's so many people that need care. There's so many children, so many adults, so many people that just need someone to sit down and play checkers with them even. I mean, you name it. Read a book to an elderly person. Help them go grocery shopping. Take them to church. Do whatever it is that they want to do or you want to do. Whatever society needs. And one of my favorite poking points in this thing, which really bores a hole in this whole automation scheme, and even if everything was automated, we could still have a locally administered federal job guarantee to handle the needs of society that we choose to compensate. But the idea, to me, of a child not being able to go to gym class but once or twice a month, not being able to play in the band because they can't afford a clarinet rental or whatever, not being able to take art class because there's just only one day a month that they can go to art class when it used to be an everyday thing. I mean, there's so driver's ed, home ec, all these things that have largely just been sucked away. I mean, if we fully funded every job that we really needed to do, not just the low-end jobs that the job guarantee would cover, but all the maintenance of our buildings, all the maintenance, we would be at full employment. You okay there, sir?
Yeah, just had a coughing fit there. I have a little sinus problem, so I can hear you though.
There you go.
Please continue.
I think to myself, the children, that don't get to partake in these things because they failed the lottery of birthright, so they don't have the money to go and engage in these activities. I mean, I watch these people that are in all these travel clubs and stuff, and they've got the Suburban, the black Suburban with the tinted windows, and the kids have the custom bag with their bat and gloves and everything, and they're all playing when these other kids can't even do the basics in youth league. I mean, just silly things like that you look at and you say, how in the world can you tell me that there's not work out there? And I think that as a community, the vast majority of people are not doing great. So the idea of being able to, in fact, get children and other people that have problems, taken care of. I mean, how many elderly people do you know of? Let me back up. We had an elderly person that worked at Real Progressives that was one of our PMO people. And she didn't have care. She was lonely. She needed help. She needed care. She didn't have help getting back and forth to the stores. She didn't have help when it came to transportation. She didn't have help in so many ways. And lo and behold, in the middle of the night, taking care of her sick father, she passed away from a diabetic problem. And these are things where we could have people, we could choose to help people that are in need like that. And if we do this right and we institute a job guarantee, there isn't going to be situations of that kind of destitution anymore in America. That's the beautiful thing about a job guarantee. And so what I'm hoping, ultimately is that as you're back now, Alice, as we go forward, the idea of being able to provide for the needs of even those people that have situations that don't seem in any way, shape, or form profitable or in any way, shape, or form, plausible, that we can in fact architect a public purpose job to compensate someone for caring for people with unique needs. That to me is the death knell for capitalism in the sense of we know it today. Because right now that axe is always just right behind you, chopping, 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 and you're running on the treadmill trying to stay in front of the axe just to keep yourself alive. And eventually, you die because you can't keep going nonstop, and that axe finally gets you. And I think that right there is a real Machiavellian society we live in that allows for such cruel and brutal living. And I believe the job guarantee alleviates that pressure immensely. I mean, it really, really takes away a lot of pressure from the insides. And families, you look at families who suffer over financial malaise. I mean, this changes the very fabric of society by taking that fear of destitution away. That very fear creates so many other problems in families, at work, you name it, in society at large. I think that this is a great day, being May Day, to look at what labor could be, as opposed to surfing capital. It could serve the local community and serve society as a whole.
Right. Yes, I agree with that 100%. I have to apologize. I have terrible allergies.
That's okay.
It's causing me to have a coughing fit. It's ridiculous. But it's embarrassing too. But everybody has them, so let's have none of them. Anyway, yes, the job guarantee allows labor to socially produce. You see, to work for the betterment of society in a different way. We tend to view labor's job errantly. We tend to view labor's job as selling its labor power to the capitalist, you see, in exchange for money. And of course, Marx highlighted what was really going on there with surplus value, which we won't get into. But people tend to see valid, useful work as when labor goes and punches in for a private employer and produces a good or a service that then becomes a sale on a shelf to consumers, right? And the problem with that is that's not the only valid type of work. Society does produce food and clothing for itself. Labor does that. But there are also needs in communities that capitalism won't touch because there's no monetary gain in it. There's just no way to earn a financial profit in it. And capitalism will ignore that to the detriment of society. You'll see crumbling streets. You'll see everything that you can imagine in communities just falling apart. You'll see elderly people who are desperate for company. They're very lonely. You'll see all sorts of bad things where society neglects its own self in these local community settings. And this is where labor can be put to use in a different way for social production, in a different way than what we would look at as private production. A job guarantee allows us to redefine what work is, what valid, useful, productive work is. It allows us to see through the bullshit and see clearly about what's going on. And at the same time, as you mentioned, it allows us to wrest control over the narrative from the capitalist. For too long now, the capitalist has used unemployment as a whip to crack on the back of labor, to scare the piss out of labor. And, excuse me, it's happening again. Can you believe that? It's almost like a curse or something. You know? I can't believe this. Excuse me. But anyway, the capitalist uses unemployment to threaten the worker and keep him in line and keep wages low. And the job guarantee completely eliminates that from the equation. No longer can the capitalist use the threat of unemployment to intimidate labor. And that's an important aspect of the job guarantee, is labor taking power back from the capitalist and asserting itself and refusing to lay down for a tiny handful of society. Excuse me.
That's okay. All right, so here we are coming up at the top of the hour, and I guess the idea for me is this: we've watched as progressives as a whole tend to give in and cave in, if you will, and let go of these important ideals as we get into election season and stuff, simply because of the first past the post mindset. We see people already today. I did a stream last night talking about how people are already out there saying, in case Bernie doesn't win, I just want everyone to be aware I plan to vote blue no matter who. And it's just, talk about society giving up on hope.
That just makes
literally
me sick
giving
hearing
up
that.
on hope.
That makes me want to cough even more. Stephen,
I know it causes an involuntary retch in me. So, but this is the problem, right? We as a society keep going back to what we would call easy and safe, pathetic, scared creatures that keep falling back on, hey, this stove over here only burns me, so much. It doesn't burn me nearly as bad as this stove does.
That's hilarious.
So I'm just going to keep burning my hand on this stove. I'm not going to fight for anything better. And this cave-in treatment, when I see people do it, especially this far out in advance, you don't have to look at the capitalists for why this is happening. You look over inside our own camp and you go, holy shit, what are you doing? Why are you dumbing me down? Why are you making me feel like I've got to cave in before I've negotiated? If this were 19 whatever, and we were working in a factory and these people saying vote blue no matter who were coming out of the thing, and they'd be the ones crossing the picket line. They would be the ones that would literally be sitting there saying, we don't need an 8-hour workday. 20 hours is fine. I just want to keep my job. 20 hours, fine, work me 20 hours. I'll sign up for it. I mean, and that's what it's like. I just, there's something inhuman about the mindset that really, really causes me incredible amounts of rage-induced anger. I mean, just that right there is one of those things where I feel like we as a movement, as a people, have failed one another. The people that do that this early, that are already starting that, have failed society at every meaningful level.
Society has failed itself.
Absolutely.
Okay. What it has done is it has allowed a small handful of people from within society to convince society as a whole that there is no such thing as society. And then it has convinced it to lie down. It's told society, good dog, lie down. Go lie down. And let us run roughshod over you. And in the process, it has stolen the birthright of society itself, which is its currency issuing power and its prosperity as a result of that currency issuing authority. And it has handed it over to the control of a small handful of people we call the 1%, who basically direct all government spending towards themselves, whilst deregulating activity, allowing them to become even more offensive towards society. And the more power that they muster, and the longer this goes on, the more apathetic the majority of society becomes. It just lies down and takes it. Of course, you have a small handful, or a large handful over here, of progressives and left-wing activists who sit there with their fists in the air and, and they're saying, struggle, struggle, we've got to fight the man. And that's all well and good, except they don't know who the hell they're fighting. They think they're fighting the enemy. And they are. Capital is the enemy. But what they're not understanding is they're also their own worst enemy. When you don't even know who, if you're not self-aware, how in the hell are you going to bring about progress if you're not even self-aware? Okay, you're no different than a piece of software. You're programmed to do something and you execute. So when you stand there on the street corner and you go, hell no, we won't go, and you're doing that, and you got your pussy hat on, and you're screaming, vote blue no matter who, it's quite clear you're not self-aware. You're a pre-programmed robot who's marching and doing exactly as they're programmed to do, exactly as they're told. This is what they're told to do. This is what they go out and do. Okay? They do not behave as though they're self-aware. If they were self-aware, okay, you would know right away, because they'd know what society is. They'd know what a nation is. They'd know what really is going on, and they'd really know who issues the currency themselves. And they would become self-aware, and they would behave that way. They would say, well, fuck this lot over here. We're going to run roughshod them, taking it back from them, taking power back from them. Vote blue no matter who. Fuck that shit. It does matter who. If you are not one of us, you are against us. Who is us? Society. If you are if your candidate, here, let me try it this way. Any candidate who is proposing policies that sound good on the surface, but involve taxing some contingent to pay for something, they're actually working against the nation. They're actually proposing things that will harm society.
Boy, okay. I hope people heard that.
It's true, because look, let me explain to you why. If I said I want universal health care, and I'm a politician, and I said, I'm all for universal health care, that's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to do it. We're going to tax the rich, and we're going to tax this, and we're going to tax that to pay for it. Within 24 hours, you're going to see an article in a major newspaper, or you're going to hear a talking head on a mainstream media source say that the price tag on your proposal for universal health care is $22 trillion over 10 years. How are you going to pay for it? Where are you going to get the 22 trillion? I told you, we're going to tax the rich. You really think the rich is going to fork over 22 trillion? This is ridiculous. You know what the military's budget over here is? 750 billion. You're talking 22 trillion. Where are we going to find that kind of money? There's only so much money. This is crazy. This is just crazy. It's crazy talk. It's crazy left-wing socialist commie propaganda. And you know what's going to happen? You're never going to get universal health care. And if you do get it by some miracle, it'll be taken away from you in some way. How is it going to be taken away? Slowly over time, they'll be cut. And the only reason why Republicans, the only reason why the Tories, okay, in the UK, are able to come back out of nowhere and start cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting everything that had been built up, is because people are not self-aware. Society is not self-aware. It does not realize that it alone controls. It alone controls everything in society. Everything in the nation is controlled by society. Society can choose to impose upon itself anything that it wants. It can go any direction. If society chooses to have universal health care, then society simply looks at its own real resources and says, do we have them? Do we have enough? And if the answer is yes, then universal health care is easily affordable by society. It's not one sector imposing its will on another sector and then telling the other sector it must pay for it. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. Okay, look, I don't care for the top of the hour. I'm telling you this right now. I'm telling everybody this right now. Getting down to the nuts and bolts of this. You know what a nation is? A nation, and I've said this a million times, it consists of every single citizen. It's a group of people that come together, a group of individuals that come together, and they decided to call themselves by a certain name. It's like a tribe. They've identified. Okay, and they occupy some land. So you know what they do? They draw imaginary borders around this land, the space on the earth. And then they call that land a name. And that's how they give themselves a name. So you've drawn some imaginary borders around this land here, and you call it, well, this is the United States. You know, and over here, some imaginary borders. Well, actually, they're real borders, you know, because you got water around the UK and you got water around Australia. So, well, this is Australia here. Well, this is the UK over here. Okay, that's the founding of a nation right there. Now they say, well, you know, we need to govern ourselves. You know, we need to have rules. We're going to have like civilization. What do? Well, we'll institute a government. So they institute a government. Well, the government, somebody's got to issue the money. Well, the government's going to do that. So why would the government do it? Because society says so. Society instituted the government, and then society decided it would issue its own money. Then society decided, all right, what do you want to do? Do you want society to control the means of production directly, or do you want to allow private ownership of the means of production? So, well, let's go ahead and have private ownership of the means of production because capitalism is so wonderful. So, okay, but the public's going to issue the money. Oh, yes, of course. But let's deregulate the financial sector because rich people want that. See, this is where the problem starts. Society does not realize that there is only one nation, one people, and we decide for ourselves. Canada does not come down to the United States and tell it how to govern itself. Canada does not come down to the United States and tell us how to spend our money that we create. U.S. society decides whether or not it will have universal health care or not. All right? So I want you to picture the real situation, the reality as it truly is. One human being in the nation, and that's it. This is one human being.
Are you describing DSGE?
No. I'm not talking about the representative agent. I knew you were going to do that. The moment I said that. No. What I'm trying to say is because people can't seem to grasp a simple concept that all the people together form one nation, and we, as a people, decide our own fate. It's not the capitalist. It's not lack of money that determines whether or not we will. You know, it's not. Well, we got to rely on China to lend us some money if we want to have universal health care. No. You don't have to worry about the Wall Street speculation tax. No,
pretty good.
It's not that either. What it is the reason why we do not have universal health care in the United States is simple. Society has not determined that it deserves it.
Wow.
It hasn't decided to have it yet. But when society finally becomes self-aware and says, you know, there are many advantages to having universal health care, we should take care of ourselves, then it will. It will simply have universal health care. It's really that simple. And that's where it gets back to labor. There is no fight realistically with capital. There's only a struggle with itself. Society is struggling with itself. And the reason why it struggles is because it's not aware of itself as one functioning body. But a team, funny enough, they can sit there and watch, say, Manchester United play football, and they can recognize a team on the pitch. They can see a team function. And when one person scores a goal, the whole team scores a goal. But when they look at their own nation and society itself, they can't see one team. They see a group of individuals, sovereign individuals.
Bunch of golfers.
Who, yeah, and this is all BS. Society, they buy into the idea that society, literally, the idea is that society issues its own currency, which it then taxes itself to get revenue to spend. It's nonsense. Okay. The reason why we have this propaganda in a modern world today is to prevent you, from becoming self-aware. And when I say you, I'm talking about every one of you, society, labor, everyone. It prevents you from becoming self-aware. But let me tell you something right now. The billionaire class, oh, they're self-aware, all right. They're very aware of what they're doing to you. They're very aware of the score, the full score. They know where the money comes from. They know what taxes really do. And if you knew, there would be a different type of labor movement. And that labor movement of unity would scare the shit out of them. It's the one thing that causes them to lose sleep at night these days. The 1% lose sleep at night because they're terrified that you're becoming self-aware because of MMT. And rightly, you should become self-aware. Society should become self-aware because it's goddamn time that the bullshit come to an end. I'm tired. I'm here for labor. That's the reason why I do what I do, is labor. And I'm tired of watching the working man and woman be urinated on by a bunch of worthless individuals who are made out to be gods simply because numbers on a spreadsheet that they have their name on are much larger than the numbers on other spreadsheets from the common worker. So they're gods. I'm tired of watching the abuse of human beings. I'm tired of watching society lay down and hand over its birthright to a small group of individuals. There's no reason for this. There is no such thing as how you're going to pay for it. There's no such thing. Society will pay for it by simply authorizing the spending. It'll simply say, we want universal health care, and then it will have it. Just like when you decide, I'm going to go to bed and go to sleep, so you do. It's that simple. As an individual decides that they're going to go to bed and fall asleep at 10 p.m., society says, I'm going to have universal health care now. And so it will. You can't do that though till you become self-aware. And as far as labor is concerned, labor will struggle and shadow box, led in all sorts of different directions. And it will be told the enemy is over here, and now it's over there, and then the enemy is over here. And it'll take punches and it'll swing at something that will get it nowhere. And it will keep fighting this endless, useless battle until it wakes up and realizes, wait a minute, I control the money, not capital. How the fuck did that asshat with the top hat and the monocle take control over me? And then he's going to realize that he's the one with the muscles in his arm, with the scars on his body from all the work. And he's also going to realize that he's the one that controls the money too. The 1% live in fear of that day. But that day is fast approaching. It's fast approaching because every day more and more of you become aware of the reality of how the monetary system actually works, the basics of it. God help these people when we finally achieve critical mass. What do I mean by that? Violence? No. I mean that everything that they have come to expect out of life, to be treated with privilege, while they piss on everyone else, it's all going to be taken away. It's all going to be taken away. And it's going to be replaced by a just nation. A nation with a national government that ensures the well-being of its own population. So, going back full circle now to your original question at the beginning of all this, with May Day here, what does a modern labor movement look like? A modern labor movement in a modern monetary economy is unity, is self-awareness. That's what it would look like. A unified, self-aware, single body that has come to the full realization that it alone controls the money, not the capitalist. It alone controls the one thing the capitalist wants more than anything, money. And it alone is the only one that can allow the capitalist to have power. And when labor realizes that, then it's the end game.
I think the one thing that labor gives capital that's a freebie, that's like a real welfare for the wealthy, is adulation and worship.
It gives it way too much importance.
Absolutely.
It describes way too much importance on the capitalist as though it's God.
That's right. And that gift, when you have all the money in the world and you have all the boats you can buy and all the planes you can have, and you have all the businesses you want and every second's another million, when that's your life, the only thing you don't have is the love of the people. And so just like, King Xerxes, who just wanted to be loved by the people, kneel before me and I'll give you kingdoms kind of thing. I just want your love. We keep giving it to them through deification of Bill Gates or demonization of the Koch brothers. Bottom line is that we keep trying to pretend like they are gods, and they're not. They're not. And it's time we stood up and as one body, black, white, gay, straight, the whole enchilada, and became one organism to stand up for each other. And it would drown out all this nonsense and it would fix itself. It really would. True organization and true sense of family and society. I mean, people are going to fight. People are going to disagree. People are going to have problems. It's not utopia. That's you go back to the Matrix and you remember the problem with the initial Matrix. It was too perfect. It wasn't believable. It was impossible to achieve. So they had to actually throw some defects in there to make it believable. And, I can remember, the one guy sitting there slicing up the steak and he looks down and he goes, you know what? I know it ain't steak, but damn it, it tastes good anyway. And I like it. And I think that people sometimes like that fake world more than the real world. And the real world itself could be so much more powerful than even the fake world was if they but stood fast and held their ground and fought nonstop for society to control its own means of production, in particular, the currency issuance of the nation.
For society to control its own destiny.
That's right. That's right.
That's basically what means of production, whatever. The fact is society needs to become self-aware and that it has the authority, and it is the only authority that can control its own destiny.
That's right.
And like I said, which we've established is that society has relegated that responsibility to a handful within society, and it's made them out to be gods, insurmountable enemies to provide us our daily bread that are our enemy. And truth is, they probably are our enemy. Look at the way they treat people. But they are not greater than you. You, the people. You're far more powerful than they will ever be.
That's right. All right, Ellis. With that, I'm going to say goodnight and thank you, sir. Thank everybody for joining us. We've been on here for a good 90 minutes.
Maybe I've been coughing for the past 90 minutes because it seemed to go by rather fast.
It went by very, very fast. I love spending time with you, sir.
I'm terribly sorry about just started getting ill all of a sudden. Allergies are really bad.
Yeah, it
And
happens. You're human.
I can't control it. I went to get water and it still didn't fix it. What am I supposed to do?
Well,
Okay.
Get yourself some sleep, brother. I'm going to get some sleep, and I hope everybody enjoyed this May Day presentation. With that, I'm going to go ahead and bid everyone a good night. Ellis, thank you, sir. And we will see you all in the next episode. Have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.